This episode is brought to you by my Fertility Friday group programs. New groups are starting in April of 2017, and there are only a limited number of spaces available. Make sure to head over to fertilityfriday.com/group program to reserve your spot today. That's fertilityfriday.com/group program. This is the Fertility Friday podcast, episode number 131. Welcome to the 131st episode of the Fertility Friday podcast. Thank you for joining me today. I'm Lisa from fertilityfriday.com, and this is your source of information about the fertility awareness method and all things fertility. I'm so excited to share today's episode with you. Today is another installment of my Fertility Awareness Reality series, and today I have Kelly with me. She is one of my group program participants, so the most recent group program that just finished here a couple weeks ago. And in our episode today, Kelly just shares a little bit about her experience. She's not actively trying to conceive just yet, although she was part of my conception group. She'll be starting to try to conceive within the next couple of months, just depending on how things go for her. And so she shares a little bit about some health challenges that came up while she was in the group and different things that she discovered. So I know that you'll enjoy today's episode with Kelly. And I still do have some spaces left in my Fertility Friday group program. If you're listening to this in real time as it's airing, the programs are starting in about 2 to 3 weeks. So starting right away here. So if you're wanting to be part of the groups, I definitely encourage you to head over to fertilityfriday.com/group program and put in your application as soon as you can, just to make sure that there's still space and time left for you to be part of the group. So I'd love to have you in there. If you have questions about it, you can always set up a 15-minute consult with me. It's free of charge. So if you do have questions, if you're not sure if it's a good fit for you, or if where you are in your cycles would work, or if you have other questions about it and you're just not too sure if it's going to work with your schedule or anything like that, I'd love to chat with you a little bit more about it. So you can always set up a consult with me, and you can do that right from my Work With Me page, and you can also do that from the group program page. So if you head over to fertilityfriday.com/group program, towards the bottom of the page, you'll actually see the link that just says set up your free 15-minute consult with me. Some of the questions that I get the most often about the group program, one of them is from women who are potentially just, whether it's PCOS or some other type of endocrine challenge, and they're not having regular, frequent periods. So if you're going 60 days in between periods and you're worried that you won't even have a period during the group, I get questions like that. And in those types of situations, sometimes it's a fit and sometimes it's not. So if we have a consult, if you want to talk about it, I'll tell you if I think it's a good idea. One of the challenges, if you fully are just not really having a period, is that some of the other ladies in there are going to be, going through their cycles. They're going to be seeing mucus, and they're going to be charting it and really putting into practice some of the things that we're talking about. So if you're not having any of those experiences over the 2.5 months that we're together, then it might be a little bit challenging and frustrating for you. But depending on where you are in your cycle and where you're at with everything, it may not be a problem at all. So that's one of the, especially if you find yourself in that type of situation and you're not sure that it's a fit. If it's not a fit, I'll tell you. And I've definitely done that with some of the ladies who I've met with, where I've spoken to a couple women that haven't had their period in several years. And if you find yourself in that situation, the group program setting probably isn't the best, just because it can be a bit frustrating. Some of the other questions I get, especially around, time differences and things like that. This time around in the group program, what was really interesting was that I actually had a woman who was in the group who wasn't able to attend. So she had actually gotten her time zones mixed up. And so she thought that the group was meeting at 2:30 her time, in the afternoon, but it was actually 2:30 in the morning. But she was incredible. She participated every week. She listened to all of the recordings, and she was a really active member of the Facebook group. And we were able to, I go live in our private Facebook group quite frequently to answer questions and things like that. So she was really able to participate, even though she wasn't able to attend any of the sessions live. So that was the first time that had happened, that I had a member of the group who wasn't able to attend any of the sessions live, but she was still able to benefit from it. So I wouldn't necessarily recommend if you can't attend any of the sessions, but I want you to know that even if you miss a session or two or something like that, the way that the program is structured and the fact that we do record every meeting, I do still want you to watch the meetings and participate and everything. But I think it's good to know that even if you do have a scheduling conflict or there's a week or two that you know that you may not be able to attend, that you can still gain so much from being part of the group, which is really great to know. So I hope that helps at least to answer some of the questions that you might have about the group. And that preamble was kind of on the spot. I didn't actually plan to talk for so long. But yes, do let me know if you have questions. Set up a consult with me if you have specific questions and you're not sure if it's going to be a good fit, because then we could talk about it and really figure out if it's going to work. And otherwise, I hope that you enjoy today's episode. So without further ado, let's jump right into my episode with Kelly. And I always say this before the on-air client episodes that I do, but this is not meant to be medical advice. I am not a doctor and I don't play one on the internet. And so any advice or suggestions that I give to Kelly within the context of our sessions or through the context of the entire podcast is not meant to be specific advice for anybody. It's anything that we talk about, Kelly and I, is within the context of our professional working relationship. And so I just want you to keep that in mind. So without further ado, let's hop into today's episode. And I'm so excited to welcome my guest, Kelly, to the show. Kelly was one of the group program participants in my most recent group program. So we have been together for a while now. It feels like 10 weeks. So the program is officially done now, but Kelly wanted to come on the show and share a little bit about her experience and be part of the Fertility Awareness Reality series. So welcome to the show, Kelly.
Thanks for having me.
Well, thanks for being here. And a good way to start would be maybe for you to share just a little bit about what brought you to the group and what inspired you to jump in and learn fertility awareness.
Sure. So let's see. I guess it was back in the fall of last year. I decided to go off the birth control pill that I'd been on for many, many years. And one of my good friends, who's done a lot of studying women's health and always shared her, research with me, turned me on to your podcast. And so I got sucked in, and it just kind of happened. At that time, I was not necessarily looking for another reason to go off the birth control pill, but just being reassured that through all the research that you put out on the show that it was necessary. And so I kind of got fired up, like, why haven't I done this sooner? And just kind of really delved in and listened to a lot of your episodes, and then signed up for the group class to learn more, and I've loved it.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm so glad you found it. Yeah, it's been really interesting. I always wonder what it's like, because I always say this, I'm sure I've said it on the podcast several times, but for me, I came to this knowledge over a period of time. So I was able to ease into it probably a little bit more than you were. What was that like? Or was it just kind of like whatever, just to be kind of ambushed with all of it at once?
Yeah, well, it was definitely enlightening, because I feel like I'm pretty well educated and knowledgeable and like healthy and all of these things, but I guess I just didn't know what I didn't know, which is that, the sooner you go off birth control pills, kind of the better in terms of thinking about conception. And I, was recently married last summer, and most, after realizing that, I talked to my friends. I'm like, oh, how long were you off the pill before you tried to get pregnant? Everyone's like, oh, a year plus. I'm like, well, how come I didn't know this? And so that was kind of what spurred me. But in terms of like the influx of data and info and knowledge, I kind of loved it, because I think just the more you know, the better. So I kind of did that to myself, just read all the books and everything. So it was fine for me, but also, like I mentioned, it kind of just gets you more riled up. Like, I want more people to know about this. So I'm, definitely glad that you're out there telling people all these things. So it's great.
Well, and one of the things that I'm currently doing is I've actually interviewed a few women in the Fertility Friday community. I reached out in the Facebook group and asked if anyone had experiences on the pill, and a few ladies reached out to me and sent me some emails with their experiences. And so everyone's experience is so different. Some women really don't. It's interesting though, because some women say like, well, I didn't really notice anything. But then when you kind of get into it a little bit more, it's that retrospect, like, but looking back, I did notice this and that. Uh, what was your experience like? After coming off, did you have any side effects on it, or did you kind of have a pretty easy ride?
Yeah, I had a pretty easy ride. I really didn't have any symptoms or issues per se, although I never had, painful periods even before being on the pill or anything like that. But what I realized coming off of it, because my big thing was like, oh, but it's so convenient, it's so easy, and I can just take this pill every day and whatever. And then when I came off it, I'm like, it's just as easy now as it was, like, if not easier, that I don't have to remember to take the pill. Like, why was I doing that if I didn't have any benefits necessarily, other than, I guess, just being able to not have a period, which is what I did, but that's not necessarily the best thing for you. So I was just realizing like, oh, that was, convenient, quote unquote, but maybe unnecessarily detrimental for that convenience.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, it's good to hear that you didn't really have any negative side effects, because I think it's important to put out a balanced perspective. Although I can't even pretend like I'm really putting out a balanced perspective, because I definitely do have. I think it's fairly obvious that I have a lot of concerns about hormonal contraceptives. But I think that it is important to know, of course, everyone doesn't have bad experiences on it. All I really want is for women to be informed of the possible risks, so that if something does happen, then you at least know that it's on your radar, and then if you don't have any issues, great, but at least you knew what to watch for. All right. So maybe you can share a little bit of background with us. So you recently went off the pill in the fall, and when did you first go on hormonal contraceptives? At what age, and about how long were you taking them for?
I was about 18 when I went on the pill, and it was actually really primarily for acne. At the time, I think I wasn't sexually active, maybe, within that first year of being on it, but that wasn't the original reason. And then I was on the pill for basically about 10 years, if not a little bit longer, with only short spurts, maybe 3-4 months here and there that I was off of it.
Yeah, that's quite a while. Well, and so we've had a couple of sessions together, and we've had 10 weeks together. So I guess the best place to start, which is where I usually start, is to go through our check-in form and just to see how you're doing with the fertility awareness knowledge and the charting aspect of things, how it's all going. So as you were going through the form, was there anything that came up or anything that stood out that you wanted to go over a little bit more?
Let's see. The first thing I think I noted on here was telling the difference between dry, smooth, and lubricative days. And I put kinda because I haven't really had any of those. Like, I think I know what lubricative is and should feel like, but I haven't had that. So it's hard for me to confidently say, yes, I can tell the difference between all of them. And I even very rarely have the smooth sensation. I feel like 99.9% of the time it's just dry, even though I've had mucus observations at some peak and some non-peak qualities if they're finger testable, but not if they're just based on sensation.
Yeah, that's definitely harder to identify the difference between those sensations if you're not really experiencing them a whole lot. So I have your charts up here, and I do see a bit of a difference. I think it's a fairly obvious difference between our first, I guess it would kind of be the second chart. So we have a chart from December to January, and then your January to March. So this cycle looks like it was a little bit on the longer end, and you had some spotting throughout your cycle. And so that would have been how many cycles off of the pill for this one?
Let's see, I went off in mid-October. So like 3, yeah.
Okay. And was there anything different or anything that changed between January to March and this time? just so far? Was there anything different?
Well, I think probably right before I got my most recent period, the beginning of March, was when I got my diagnosis of Hashimoto's thyroiditis. So that changed a lot of dietary things for me, going gluten free and mostly dairy free, and starting thyroid medication. So kind of retrospectively, it seems that a thyroid disorder could be kind of the reason for my generally irregular cycles prior to this point. That, and combined with still like influx, having gone off the pill. So kind of a few things that it could be.
Well, and your previous cycle that's 49 days.
Yeah, that was a really long one, and which came after like two cycles that were more normal, like in the 30-ish, 30 to 35-day range. So this was definitely kind of a red flag that I think even spurred me further to be like, I need to go get some thyroid testing done, because I'd already had it in the back of my mind,
Yeah.
mostly from our sessions together.
Well, yeah. So a little bit of background for the listeners. We were having our session, and then Kelly, you mentioned that you had some labs that were done last year. So those are the most recent ones you had. And then when we looked at your labs, your TSH level was, I don't remember exactly, but close to 5. It was 4.9 or something like that, which is at the top of the lab range that the lab range on the form. So it wasn't over the lab range, but it was literally at the top of the lab range. And from my understanding, from a functional perspective, the more reasonable, ideal TSH level for a woman, especially who's trying to conceive, shortly in the future, would be closer to like 2 or between 1 and 2.
Yeah.
So I pointed that out, but unfortunately that was an old lab. That was from a year ago. And so between now and then, you said your TSH level was at 15. Is that what you said?
Yeah, 16.5 actually. That was from the last month's test. So it kind of skyrocketed in that time.
Yeah, we spoke about that, and that's frustrating because in your case, that wasn't brought to your attention that it was at the top of the lab range, let alone the fact that it was outside of the ideal range in general, but at the top of the actual lab range. So, I'm really glad that we had our session and that you happened to have that handy and we pointed that out, because I know that kind of signaled for you to go and get that checked out. So it'll be interesting to see what your cycle's like this time, because of course this cycle being 49 days, and then we kind of have this random bleeding and things like that. So it's hard to say what this cycle will be like, but so far it looks different because I don't see any unusual bleeding and we're already on day 20.
Yeah, I'm very, very intrigued to see how it plays out. But
so when I see charts like that, where just to describe it a little bit more, so it's quite long, and then we have abnormal, well, I shouldn't say abnormal, which I'll just say bleeding, mid-cycle bleeding and spotting throughout, just kind of like here and there. And then there's also mucus, but it's not following a particular pattern. So we have a couple of days mucus here, a couple of days mucus there, and then eventually it trails on until eventually ovulation happens. Whereas this cycle now, and the current one that we're in, we're seeing your period. And so maybe we could talk a little bit about your period. Were you paying attention to how much you were bleeding? I don't remember if you use a cup or if you use...
I don't use a cup, but I was trying to pay more attention after one of our talks about that. And to me, it felt like it fell more in the normal range compared to my previous cycle, which was like a longer. So it did stay kind of within I think 7 days, versus last time it was 8 plus maybe. And it kind of followed the similar cycle in which it started out lighter and then built to medium, heavier, and then tapered off down to light and very light.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, it looks good, right? Like it looks like you had a couple days of moderate, you had a day of heavy, and then it tapered off. And then it did stop, which is also good. It didn't trail on.
I haven't had any breakthrough bleeding since then. So that's definitely an improvement over last month.
Mm-hmm. So we see what looks like a healthier pattern of bleeding to start your newest cycle, and then several dry days, and starting kind of your mucus pattern starting to show there. So it looks like whatever you're doing, you're on the right track. It's really, it's always really from my perspective, because I see all the charts, but it's really profound. You can't really describe the difference that a shift in diet can make in your chart. I mean, just to look at it, it can make such a difference if that happens to be the problem, so or something related. And also you started your thyroid medication, so that could also just be making a difference in general. I would hope that we would see a few more days of peak mucus, ideally, but I guess it remains to be seen because I'm not. Do you think that you've ovulated yet? I see a slight temperature rise here, but it's 2 days that are higher than the previous 6, so it's possible that this could be a rise, but I'm not sure if that's actually ovulation.
I don't think so because I think this is still missing 2 days and my temperature has been stayed pretty low and I haven't seen any peak mucus yet.
Okay. And are you trying to conceive now?
I'm trying to get my thyroid a little more stabilized before jumping into that, just because I know ideally, like we mentioned, TSH should be between 1 and 2. And right now I'm hoping it's down from 16, but I really don't know. And I'm getting another lab test done in about 2 weeks. So I'm hoping that it is improving. And yeah, so waiting to resolve that a little bit more.
Okay. And then when you're marking sex on the chart, is that like an unprotected day?
Yes.
Okay. That's why I'm asking, just because
Yep.
you never know. So there is a possibility whenever
Yeah.
you have. So it's like, it sounds like kind of open to it, but not trying.
Exactly.
Okay. Cool. And so, I mean, we've spoken a bit about, like, back to the original question, which is what led us to your chart and everything, about the difference between dry, smooth, and lubricative. Are you pretty comfortable with the difference between dry and smooth, or you haven't had a whole lot of, it actually looks like you haven't had a whole lot of days that you felt smooth.
I haven't had a lot of smooth either.
Yeah. So that's one of those things where you do kind of have to experience it. So what I'll say that will be sort of helpful until you actually experience it is that lubricative is a really obvious sensation. And so you can't miss it. So that's one thing. If you're kind of like, was that lubricative? Then it probably wasn't.
Exactly.
And then smooth, I feel like it's harder to say smooth is super obvious, but it is obvious in the sense that it's really not dry and it's really not lubricative. So that sounds really silly, but a smooth sensation when you're wiping, it's not dry because it feels like there's something there. And sometimes when you have a smooth sensation, you wipe and you think you're going to see mucus, but you don't because it feels like there's something there. And then a lubricative we've spoken about. So you can keep that in the back of your mind for when you actually see that a little bit.
Yeah, and I would say I definitely am conscious of wiping and noticing sensation before I'm looking. So I'm trying not to be aware of that and not just, retroactively putting a name on it. So that's why I feel like I would know if it was different than what the dry sensation that I'm used to.
Yeah, definitely. And that you'll find that to be really helpful just in general because you don't let what you see change what you thought you felt and all of that. And so have you had peak mucus ever?
Yes, a few days in the last cycle.
Okay. Yeah, I see
that
one
were
day.
Finger testable, clear, stretchy.
Okay. So you had peak mucus here and it looks like it was around ovulation, somewhere around ovulation, a couple days before. So I think that's a good sign. So what you might find is that now that you've identified the thyroid situation and you're working towards resolving that and shifting your diet, it's not like you're going to make that shift and then the next cycle is going to be 100% perfect or amazing. That's usually not how it works. You'll see, we see a very obvious shift in the right direction, but what we usually see is that as your body heals, you might have each cycle, you might see some progress, you might see a little backslide one cycle, but it's just how our body heals. It's not always in a straight line. So I think that it's really promising to see that you have had mucus. And I think I wouldn't be surprised if this cycle we started to see a pattern, or even next cycle we see a little bit healthier mucus pattern. So we'll just have to kind of patiently wait to see what happens.
Impatiently patient.
Impatiently patient, yes. The other question on the form then was, are you comfortable making your observations? Yeah, that the Justice Charting app we've had a lot of so the Justice Charting app, it's different. It's a web-based application, and so there's certain challenges that just come with any technology really. But other than the things with the app, so I mean here on your day 11, 12, and 13, it marked a count of 3, but the only reason it did that is because you didn't mark in your observations for that day. So I can see that it was dry.
Yeah.
But because you didn't put in the D, then it's going to give you that thing. So
yeah, I just tend to ignore those.
Yeah, so I'm glad that we're there.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk about this one. Are you confident identifying which days are fertile and infertile? Yeah, this is for just general information. So in terms of trying, so when you get to the point of trying, because what happens, I think we spoke about this in the group. I don't remember if we did, but what happens is because we've been programmed to believe that we can get pregnant every day of our cycles, and we've lived pretty much our entire adult lives being deathly afraid of pregnancy. What happens when you get into that place where you're kind of open to pregnancy? What I've found just in general, and what you probably have found or will find within the next cycle or two, is that when you make that shift from birth control to kind of trying, not trying, because we've been programmed to believe that we are fertile every day and that we're going to get pregnant when our partners look at us, let alone touch us, then what happens is you can have that, there's like this super quick shift that happens from like, oh, it's totally cool, I'm just going to wait to see what happens, to why the heck am I not pregnant? Or you might just get pregnant, right? So it's really one or the other. But although we're in that place of openness, because of the programming, we really do think it's just going to happen, right? Like, and it could not. So it's kind of just one of those things. So I'm just kind of putting that out there because to lead us into the discussion of like, when's the best day to try? And so, I mean, in terms of telling which days are fertile and which days are not, any days of either peak or non-peak mucus, we do consider fertile. And then when you're trying to conceive, you're going to really want to pay attention to the peak days. So any days of clear, stretchy, or slippery. I guess there's a bit more to it than that, but that's the very basics. So have you and your partner talked about having his sperm tested?
We have talked about it, and I think I just got sidetracked with all of my other medical appointments that I was scheduling for myself, that I haven't scheduled his yet, but is on my list.
Well, I recently recorded an episode with Mark Sklar, so it has not aired yet. By the time this airs, it won't have aired, but it will air within the next few weeks. And in that episode, and also I can just refer everybody back to the first episode that I had with Mark Sklar. We spoke about male fertility in particular, not exclusively, but we did spend a lot of time on that episode talking about it. And so it's fresh in my mind, Kelly. And so he talks about a lot of things that are really important to know. One of the most, I think, impactful things that he speaks about is that he really just breaks down what's going on with the sperm. So we have this idea that, men have zillions of sperm, and that means that it's totally cool. Like there's lots of them. But what he breaks down is that the majority of them can't swim properly. And then the kind of like the rest of those have really poor morphology, like 2 heads, 2 tails, or whatever that means in sperm land. So there's really only a small percentage of sperm that are capable of actually fertilizing the egg. And so then your cervical mucus, which is incredible, our cervical mucus is incredible. We should really be learning about that not instead of our eyes and ears, but like in addition to, I guess, because it's also important to learn about your eyes and ears. But you know what I'm saying. But cervical mucus has these qualities that filter out the bad sperm. So then when it was really helpful for him to describe the significant percentage, because it sounds like a healthy man would have about 15% of his sperm being capable of fertilizing an egg. That means like 85% are not.
Yeah. That's super
a healthy
fascinating,
man.
Especially because all guys think that they're like Superman and that they're all, they have 110%.
Yes, And that the sperm are super robust and they're gonna like as if they're lifting weights on the way to
exactly.
and they're like doing all this work. So it's really interesting because when he ejaculates inside of you on a fertile day and you have cervical mucus present, so then the mucus has these qualities where it actually filters out the bad sperm. So the ones that can't swim properly, if you can, I wish you could see my hand. I'm like making this hand gesture of like a really limp, twitchy sperm. But they can't. So the ones that can't swim properly, that don't have good motility, they can't literally swim through the mucus. So it kind of blocks them. And then your mucus has these little, in the research, they refer to them as loafs. So that's not the technical term, but that's the way that they characterize them because of how they look. And they like attach to the sperm and basically kill the bad ones. It's like a video game or something, if you picture it. But so then when he says like 85% of them aren't that good, so that makes perfect sense the way that we have this filtration system in our through our cervical mucus. So that's a really long-winded way of saying that the takeaway from the interview that I did with him is that 40 to 50% of the time, it's if there's an issue, it's him. So we're not saying that there is or there isn't, but we're saying that if you're doing your due diligence and you're getting your blood work done and all of that, it's equally as important for him to do his due diligence and just, get it over with. Because then if there's no issue, then great, we know it. He wasted an hour at the doctor's office and felt a little weird, masturbating in a bathroom. It was a little awkward.
I think that sounds way less bad than getting blood drawn multiple times a month that I have to do. So.
Yes, exactly. I mean, we have to be sensitive to the fact that it is weird. I wouldn't want to masturbate in a bathroom, doctor's office. Like that sounds really not very nice. So I do have to put it out there that it doesn't sound very nice. But at the same time, I think that, and I said this in the group, everybody hears it and they hear the like 40 to 50%. And they're like, wow, but they really don't think it could be my partner. And so that's really regardless of whether it could or not, like you go to your dentist and he checks your teeth. So same idea.
Totally.
All right. So rant over or whatever. But but I guess the purpose of it is then what happens is that you quickly switch from it's totally cool, whatever, to this is an emergency. Why am I not getting pregnant? Like it happens like that, especially if you go a couple months without conceiving. And so then what can happen as a woman, we take all of the blame and responsibility. So then, 6 months goes by, you're eating all of the things, there's no gluten, there's no anything, there's only healthy food and whatever. And then 6 months in, a year in, someone says, well, let's check him. And so if there is something with him, it's going to take at least 3 to 6 months for his sperm, for him to make those changes to have that sperm count and morphology and everything improve. So then you've just added an extra 6 months onto your already a year type of thing.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
I don't need to be adding any more road bumps.
No.
Roadblocks.
Yeah. And so, this is just like the ticking it off because there's probably nothing wrong, right? Like it's probably all fine. It's probably going to come back and he's going to be totally normal and it's great. So, but we want to make sure. So I'm just looking at the other, this part about avoiding pregnancy. So when you were filling this one out, were you thinking about just down the road type of thing? Like if you'd be able to use it for birth control when you needed it to be?
Yeah. Yeah, just because I haven't done it with that mindset, it just feels like it'll be different, but I feel like the knowledge is there, but it will be a different exercise.
Yeah, it's different. And what I would say is it really depends on where you're at. And what I mean by that is that, so, after you get pregnant and after you have your baby, then you might be in the mindset of like, oh, I really don't want to get pregnant right now. Or you might be in the mindset of, oh, I really don't want to get pregnant right now, but you know what? I want another one anyway. So if it happened, it wouldn't be that big of a deal. Or I totally want to get pregnant right now. So there's like 3 options and kind of gray area in between. So what I find is that the way that wherever you are in terms of your mindset on that scale is going to determine how you use the method. For example, so you were in my conception group and in my birth control group, the women in the birth control group were pretty much on the like, I don't want to get pregnant now scale. Not, I don't want to get pregnant ever, but I do not want to get pregnant right now. Like not at all. And so when you're in that mindset, so their charts are like perfect, right? Like everything is everything is written down. There's notes in every section. All of the notations are there, and we've got the count of three. If it was like charting school, they would have the, and that's not,
Top of the class.
well, but I guess I'm just pointing that out because there's no right or wrong way to chart. And the process of charting is really to help you be in tune with your body and to help you to do whatever it is that you're trying to do at the moment. So if what you're trying to do at the moment is to avoid pregnancy, well, you're going to approach it differently. If what you're doing at the moment is just trying to gain an understanding of your cycle and you know you're going to conceive in a little while, then your motivation is different. So I don't know if that's helpful, but
yeah, no, that definitely sounds like it explains me and my method going at it. I'm like, well,
yeah,
doesn't really matter.
Yeah. So, I mean, if you get to the point where you do know, okay, now I want to get serious, then the message is like, okay, well, you do have the knowledge, and that shift in mindset it'll help you. Like if you do get to that point, because I think, yeah, even if you're trying to conceive now, eventually at some point in your life, at some point, you will probably want to, even if it's just like a 6-month space, or whether it's the like, okay, we've had X number of kids and now we're done. So however that looks for you. So how are you doing stress wise? I know that the last time we talked, there was a lot of things going on that we don't have to go into in detail, but how are you doing kind of overall? Like if there was a scale of 1 to 10 and 10 was like the worst stress ever, and it's like everything that shouldn't be happening is happening, and 1 is like you're at the beach and you like the beach.
Good question. I'd say I'm like a little bit on the mid to higher range, not a 10, maybe like a 6 or a 7, mostly because of I'm looking for a house to buy and living with my in-laws and dealing with these health issues that are new to me and kind of learning this new diet and kind of all these little things that add up, and, trying to be really good on my diet, but not having a kitchen of my own, for instance. Like that's a big one. That's a big stress causer. But I will say that in our past sessions, I think I've brought up like feeling pretty anxious, and which I retroactively realized is one of the many symptoms of, hypothyroidism. And it's definitely seemed to decrease, although nothing else has changed in my life other than just taking medication and diet. And I definitely feel like when I wake up in the morning, I don't have that constant anxious feeling anymore. So that's a win for me. So that's definitely good. I mean, that could also be, it's like now officially spring and it's like basically stopped raining and the days are longer. So all those kind of mental things that affect happiness and stress. So yeah, it's definitely a mix.
Yeah, that's it. There's a lot of big things there. I think there's a lot of listeners, I'm sure, that can relate to, trying to make dietary changes, but that's a stressor. It's a habit how we eat. And so making a huge change, cutting out gluten is so hard because it's in everything. Eventually it gets to be a habit not to eat it. So for me, I don't eat gluten because I also have a thyroid issue. And so there was a time though in my life where I literally couldn't imagine what a day would be like without bread. I had no idea how it would even be possible for me not to eat bread. I bought bread all the time. I had eaten bread every time a day, several times a day, my entire life. So I honestly was like, well, if you take out bread, like, what do you eat? If you can go from that to just not even thinking about it at all, it just shows that it's a habit. But it's very stressful to do it at first. And it's especially stressful when you're not always in control of what you're eating, like in cooking, and you haven't quite figured out how to navigate social situations. That's one of the harder aspects because people are always asking, even your friends and people who love you, but they're curious about it. But there's something about food that when you decide you're not eating bread, all of a sudden everyone needs you to eat the bread. Like, I don't know what that's about, but all of a sudden everyone's offering you cupcakes, and maybe the universe is just checking to see if you're serious about this gluten-free thing. I don't know, but all of a sudden everyone's like, what do you mean you don't eat bread? Here, have a croissant.
Exactly. Yeah. But it is hard. And I mean, I feel like I have a little bit of a upper hand because my dad actually does have celiac disease. So I know what it's like, but I've never like even sympathetically tried to live that life before now. And I'm like, oh, well, it is genetic and here I am. So even though I knew what gluten-free foods, mean and where it's hidden, soy sauce and whatever, it doesn't mean that I ever like really put my mind to it. So it's definitely not a habit for me yet. So it's definitely like a conscious thing I have to think about 3, 4 times a day whenever I want to eat. Like, what can I eat? And I've definitely had some slip ups in the past, like just accidental things that got in. And I'm like, well, didn't mean to do that, but live and learn. So
Yeah.
it's a learning process.
Well, and I guess a quick kind of note on the gluten-free front is that initially, I think when you first, it's very possible to kind of sabotage yourself a little bit unknowingly when you go gluten-free, because now there's all these like conveniently packaged processed foods that are gluten-free to quote unquote make it easier for you to transition. And so from a blood sugar perspective, if you go from regular bread to gluten-free bread that's typically made with tapioca flour, and you buy gluten-free cookies that are like tapioca starch and all that, that's so those things are equally as arguably as bad because they just blast your blood sugar, they skyrocket it. So I think there's a transition period where you're kind of tempted to replace bread with bread that just doesn't have gluten, crackers with crackers that just don't have gluten, and all of that. And so in the process, what the most challenging part of it is actually taking a step back and thinking about diet in a different way. And so going from how can I replace this with the gluten-free thing to how can I eat in a way that's going to give my body the most nutrition, and what are the foods that are the most nutrient dense that I can eat. So that's, I don't know. How do you feel about that? Have you found that to be a challenge as well?
Yeah, I definitely think that I use some of the gluten-free products a little bit as like a crutch right now. Cause like, well, I can't have the real, muffin or scone or whatever it is that I want to have. So I can have this, you know, fake version that still tastes decent, like Tate's, one of my favorite cookie brands. They make a gluten-free cookie and it tastes just like the real one. And I know that because I've just had the real version like 2 weeks ago. And now I'm comparing. It's like I'm living all those comparisons. So I'm like, I wonder if you can tell the difference, between these. So I'm like, well, I don't think you can because I just tested on myself. So that definitely is part of the transition time, I think, where I'm like, oh, I'm going to let myself have it because I need a treat because I'm still like learning how to do this for sure. But
And
I
you
also
do
know
need a
that,
treat. So like
yeah,
in all fairness too, so by pointing these things out, I'm by no means advocating for this crazy abstinence, like a diet devoid of anything enjoyable. So I think that it's important to be balanced, and every now and then have the gluten-free cupcake. Like it's okay. And enjoy it. Don't
definitely.
feel bad about it. Like actually just like sit there and enjoy it and whatever. I think that it's really important to have a balance. But with that being said, I think that it's also really important to think of this as the beginning of a process, in the sense that instead of, so for me, for example, because I don't eat bread at all, so I look at meals differently. So often now I find myself, and I don't eat as much grain. So I used to eat rice with like every day, every single day. Yeah, it was like bread and rice all the time. So even we eat rice and everything, although now I make it with bone broth. So I try to like make the rice as healthy as
Yeah, I've tried
possible.
that too.
Yeah. To
Great.
like, okay, so if we're eating rice, we're going to try to make the rice as healthy as possible. But anyways, but then what I do now is I eat way more vegetables. So I think of it in terms of the plate, and I try to have vegetables on half of the plate and then have some meat and maybe throw in other things like avocado or whatever, so that my plate looks different now, but I didn't just replace bread with gluten-free bread, because then eventually you get to well, for me, I've gotten to the point where gluten-free stuff is really, really sweet. So it actually hurts my mouth. I still eat it sometimes. I'm a human being. So sometimes, and I go for the cookie. But what I've noticed it where it's almost so sweet because it's just so highly processed that it actually it's good in theory, but then it's not as enjoyable. So anyways, it's a bit of a tangent, but I think
Yeah,
it's
no, I think I've noticed that actually too. Like, 'cause I had gluten-free bread last night, like a sandwich out of it, which I haven't had like ever. And I'm like, oh, my mouth kind of like tingles.
yeah, it's bizarre. Even my husband, and he's got like a really good healthy sweet tooth and everything, but he'll be like, "Holy cow, like this is like so sweet." So, I think
It's
it's
so interesting.
yeah, and for anyone who's listening who's trying to go gluten free, I think that we with diet and stuff like that, it's so easy to go from the place that we think of food as nutrition and really work towards getting the healthiest food in our body to getting to that place where it's a game and okay, well I can't eat this, but I can eat that. And so then it's literally we're playing a game and we're forgetting the whole point is to the nutrition piece of it. So
Yeah, I will say like I try to look at like the bright side of this, and I'm like, well, it is helping me cut out my sugar overall because that's just a huge health benefit and something that I should be doing. And cutting out gluten really, if you cut out and take out, the gluten-free goodies too, then you're really cutting out a lot of extra sugar. So that's it's a plus. And it
well,
does feel better.
yeah, it does. But the challenge is that because gluten is high, complex carbohydrate, but it's a carbohydrate. So then when you're what happens is if you're not eating gluten and if you're not eating gluten-free stuff, then you end up with this hole in your diet that you didn't eat before. So you have to fill it with something. So then the question becomes, so what are you going to eat more of? Pretty big question.
Avocados for me.
Yeah.
Because they're like a treat to me.
Yes. Yeah. So that's a good point. And I think that's really important to think about making sure you're getting enough healthy fats and all that, because then you can't just like cut carbs and think that you can't just like, I think that it's really important not to think about diet as what you're going to take out. You kind of have to, another way to think about it is what am I going to add in? What am I going to eat more of? And, vegetables are a great place to start. Big salads or whatever it is, steamed vegetables or vegetables sauteed in butter, something like that, because then they taste really good and then you're getting a little bit more fat content. So yeah, I have up your diet diary here. As you were going through your own diet diary, I know you did this, 3 months ago? So quite a while ago. But so I know it's a little
before the
different
gluten-free.
now. Yeah. But do you remember as you were going through that, did anything stand out to you?
Well, you definitely become more conscious of what you're eating and drinking when you have to write it down. That's for sure. And that's something that I'm actually reevaluating right now because I think it will help me with my just balancing, like we're talking about, my diet and not filling my empty glutenless plate with bad things. I even have a note on my desk. It's like 5 vegetables a day, and that's like a minimum. Just when you write things down, it helps.
Mm-hmm.
But oh man, I wish I could eat some of these things right now. Protein pancake. Oh, so good.
Well, I think something to keep in mind is that one of the things that's helpful, especially so that you don't feel hungry all the time, and this is something that we spoke about a little bit in the group. So thinking of structuring meals around having protein, carbohydrate, and fat at every sitting, however that looks for you, and thinking, especially breakfast, thinking of how to structure that and what you can eat to make that happen. And what you'll find if you go about it that way is that it's a little bit easier because then you're not starving all the time. If you're able to combine those things. So I think that's a really good place to start. And there's this interesting concept that it strikes me as very interesting. So I was reading this article about where this idea of breakfast came from, the idea that breakfast is supposed to be sweet treats and basically dessert to start your day, whereas that was a result of a marketing campaign to sell cereal. And before that, people would breakfast wasn't really its own meal. People would eat leftovers or drink soup or something like that for breakfast and things like that. So I think for breakfast, it's important to think outside the box. Breakfast in my house looks a lot different than it used to, say 10 years ago or whatever. I make bone broth a lot. I cook a lot of whole chickens and things like that. So I always have bones. And so sometimes breakfast is literally some broth with some leftover vegetables and meat from the night before. And then something like that it's really filling and sustains me, doesn't raise the blood sugar, and it eliminates the need for bread.
Yeah, that's huge. That's definitely a big thing that I'm trying to wrap my head around, is like a different way to breakfast. Yeah, without having gluten and cutting out sugar and dairy for me. Yeah, definitely including a lot more meat, which is not something that I would normally eat for breakfast. So it's interesting. But bone broth has definitely been a good addition to the diet for sure.
Well, we have a couple minutes left. We've spoken about a few things. Is there anything that you wanted us to make sure we go over before we finish our session today?
No, I think this was super helpful. And thanks so much for the time.
Oh, you're welcome. It was my pleasure. And for all the listeners who are with us, what is something that you would want them to know just about your experience so far and all of that?
I guess one of the things that I've definitely been reflecting on a lot lately is just like, you as an individual really have to be in charge of your own health. Like, it's this process for me has been like super enlightening. And as one woman in our group put it, empowering. This class is very empowering. And it's a great way to put it. It just makes me reflect on health in general, like this, thyroid issue and other areas of my life where I'm like, no one else is going to do it but me. And I got to take control and find the right doctors and ask the right questions and do the research and, everything, and just really be on top of it. And I appreciate, that you're out there helping people be aware of that, and just being a great resource.
Well, thank you. Well, and one question that I'm starting to love asking, not everybody, I don't think that it's appropriate for every guest I have on the show, but if you could go back and tell something to your 16-year-old self, what would you tell her?
I would probably definitely be to reconsider being on hormonal birth control for that length of time that I was on it, or, at all. Like, I definitely think it can play a role, but definitely the length is something that I would stress for sure. Just that there are other ways, and it doesn't have to be the only way. So that would be a big one for sure.
Mm-hmm. Well, and if anyone's listening and they're kind of like, they're thinking about doing one of the group programs or something like that, but they're not really sure, from someone who has actually been through it, so now you're on the other side, what would you want them to know about it?
Definitely take the leap, because I'm like the most indecisive person, and it took me Lise probably knows, like days, weeks to like really commit. And I just take the plunge, and you will not regret it, because it's super helpful and super educational. And yeah, only good things can come of it for sure. So go for it.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Kelly. It was my pleasure. Of course, I love having one-on-ones. I feel like it's an indulgence, because then when we're in the group, I have to share you with everybody. So it's really nice to have that time. Although this is a very public, private conversation, but
no, totally. Yeah, I really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed today's show, please share it with a friend. You'll find the show notes page for today's episode at fertilityfriday.com/131. I hope that you enjoyed today's episode with Kelly. It was so much fun to be able to chat with her. We ended up talking a lot about managing a gluten-free diet. And so for those of you who might be new to the podcast and aren't really sure of what the connection is between gluten and thyroid, what's really interesting is that there is a well-established connection between, consumption of gluten and your thyroid. Because if you have Hashimoto's, which is a thyroid disorder that has an autoimmune component to it, what happens if you eat gluten is that gluten and your thyroid hormone look similar to each other. And so, the more gluten you eat, it can activate that autoimmune response and basically encourage your antibodies to attack your thyroid more. So it can indirectly depress thyroid function. So if you've been diagnosed with a thyroid disorder that has an autoimmune component, then it's one of the suggestions from a functional medicine standpoint would be to avoid gluten altogether. And then you can go a step further to determine if you have any other food sensitivities that may also aggravate that immune response, and avoid those as well. And that may or may not be a permanent measure, in the interim, you can always address your gut health and really focus on improving your gut health and potentially reduce, minimize, or even eliminate some of those food sensitivities in the future. But that is not an easy process. So in case any of you are wondering what the connection is there between gluten and thyroid disorders, that's a really brief general overview just so that you have an idea of why Kelly's focusing on that, making that decision. And of course, Kelly has a really great team. So I always talk about the importance of forming your healthcare team. So, in addition to the group program, us working together and what we're doing, Kelly has a really great doctor and she's got a really great naturopath on her team. And so she's really working to find health professionals that specialize in the challenges that she's having and really going and getting support in all of those different areas. So I think that's really important to point out as well. And if you would like to be part of the April 2017 group programs, I'd love to have you. You still have a little bit of time to jump in and be part of the groups. So the groups are starting in about 2 weeks or so if you're listening to this in real time. And if you're wanting to have more information, you're wanting to look at the groups and see what's happening, when they are, and all of the details, make sure to head over to fertilityfriday.com/group program. And if you have specific questions for me and you want to make sure that the group is a good fit, then make sure to set up a consult with me. And you can do that from the group program page or my Work With Me page. So if you head over to the group program page, just scroll down to the bottom and you'll see the option to book your 15-minute consult. And we can really just hash it out and talk about whether or not it's going to be a good fit for you to be part of the group. Or you can just go ahead and apply right from the group program page if you know that you want to be part of the group. So I'd love to have you. The groups are about 6 to 8 women, and I've split them up. So I have one group specifically for, women who are avoiding pregnancy, and I have another group for women who are trying to conceive. And although the information is the same, it's kind of like what Kelly and I were talking about today, which is that depending on what your intention is at the moment, which can always shift, and depending on where you're at in your life and all of those things, it just changes the way that you look at the information. So although the information is the same, the application of the information is different. And so what I found is that it's really nice to create groups of women that are kind of in the same mindset, where they are coming from a similar place in terms of how they're going to apply the information, because that really guides the conversations that we have around the method itself. So it was really, really fascinating and fun and great to have conversations in my birth control group, because they're coming from a place of just, not necessarily never wanting children, just not really wanting them now at this exact moment, like just not today. And so it was really great to create that space to talk about those things, because when you're in that space, you have different challenges, different hurdles, I guess, in the process, and just different feelings around even just a different way of managing your fertile window. Because if you're trying to avoid pregnancy, you're really managing your fertile window in a different way because you're trying to avoid pregnancy, versus the conversations that we had in the conception group, which is more focused on really understanding the fertile window, really focused on looking at your charts and really diving in and finding out if there could be, what the charts are saying about your health and your fertility, and really focusing on what to do to prepare your body for pregnancy. And so, although it's the same information in terms of the charting aspect of it, the approach and the conversations around it are really different. And so I love the dynamics that arise between the different groups. It's so much fun. And I feel like it's a really unique space. Like, I don't know where else in the world there's these wonderful spaces for us as women to talk about these things in such an open and honest way. So I would love to have you as part of it. So again, fertilityfriday.com/group program. And if you enjoyed this episode, I would love to chat with you more about it in my private Facebook group for the Fertility Friday community. And so you can head over to fertilityfriday.com/community and you'll be redirected to the Fertility Friday Facebook group. So we have lots of great discussions in there, lots of interesting topics come up, and I'd love to have you in there. Again, another safe space for us to talk about these issues around fertility and fertility awareness and sexuality and, basically anything else that comes up. So I'd love to see you in there. And I just want to thank you so much for listening and supporting the show. I feel like I have the nicest audience. When you reach out to me, when listeners reach out to me, honestly, you are all amazing. I just feel so blessed and grateful to have such an amazing group of women following me. I have the most amazing women in my programs. I have the most amazing clients. I have the greatest job in the world. It's wonderful. And like I said, I feel like I have the sweetest people. And so I love when you reach out to me and share your stories with me. And all I can say is that every day I'm motivated to keep spreading this message and to keep sharing this information with women because of you, because of all of your feedback, because of your comments, your suggestions, your kind words, and just sharing how this information has changed your life. You know, it's a really interesting thing. I started this podcast in my basement and I just wanted to share a message, and to see that it's actually making an impact is really incredible. I don't really have any words for how it feels to know that it's helping. It's helping someone out there. So thank you so much for supporting the show. And as always, until next time, be well and happy charting.